Hello and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. I'm Erin Ogunkeye, coming up for you in this edition. From teachers and students to nurses and social workers, hundreds of thousands of women are among those protesting Emmanuel Macron's pension reform plan. Considering employment and salary gaps, a growing chorus of voices argue that this reform will penalize women specifically. We'll hear more from economist Elena Basoli shortly. It was initially hailed as model legislation for protecting women against violent men. But Spain's so-called only yes means yes law brings perverse effects, sentence reductions, and early prison releases for dozens of offenders. Well, women will be slightly penalized by the increase in the retirement age from 62 to 64. Now, those are not the words of the opposition, but those of Emmanuel Macron's own Minister Delegate for Parliamentary Relations, Frank Riester. His remarks then opened up Pandora's box. The opposition, alongside economists and sociologists, all pointing out that even some of the ruling party recognizes that its pension reform plan may leave women worse off. But what's behind that claim, and how accurate is it? Well, macroeconomist Elena Basoli joins us now on set. She's also specialized in the economics of aging. Elena, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So how do you explain such a, before we get to the criticisms, originally the government said that this reform was supposed to be better for women. Why was that?
Yeah, so one point is that the government wants to include the parental leave inside the contribution for women in order to get to the retirement pension. And the second point was to increase the minimum pension up to 85% of the minimum wage. And this will be about 1,200 euros per month brut. But of course, there are criticism because not every woman will access to this kind of reform and conditions.
So before we get to the criticisms, you personally, as an economist, do you think that there are indeed parts of this reform that will benefit women?
Yeah, so indeed, these two elements that I mentioned so far are a willingness to, let's say, support women in their path through retirement and to make them contribute through their time of unpaid work in terms of years of contribution for retirement period. And also in the way of increasing the minimum pension, because we do know that up to 40% of difference in the pension there is between men and women in France. So this way is somehow a willingness to recognize the effort of women.
Then why is it that so many experts, now that they've gone through the text, are saying that this will actually put women at a disadvantage?
Yeah, indeed. So not every woman will access to this type of conditions because the first conditions, how to include the parental leave into the contribution for retirement. Well, only women with long career and complete career will have access to this condition. But we do know that many women work part-time. Many women spend lots of years in discontinuities in their working careers. And so we do know that not every woman will access to this type of condition. And the second point, as I was saying, so only people with the full pension, full annuity, will have access to an increase in the minimum pension. And again, we do know that women tend to work part-time, tend to have discontinuities in their careers. They have not access to the full annuity, and so they will be penalized in this sense.
Are there also careers that you think tend to be occupied primarily by women, where working 2 years longer would be particularly harmful?
Yes, indeed. In a longer career, if we think of the case of a teacher, of a nurse, or a cleaning service woman working in a cleaning service, these type of jobs can be very, very hard at the end of the career. And so one additional year or even two might be very harmful in terms of health, mental health and physical health. And this should be a concern, I think.
Okay, well, between gender pay gaps and differing career lengths largely linked to childcare duties, gender disparities are rampant in most of the world's pension systems. In France, as Elena was saying, women's pensions are on average 40% less than those of men. Catherine Viette takes a look at how France compares to some of its neighbors.
In Germany, women retirees receive an average of 850 euros a month, compared to 1,200 euros for men, or 33% less. Swedish women earn more, about 1,460 euros, but still far less than their male counterparts. Austria and the UK are among the least egalitarian OECD countries, with the retirement income gap between men and women reaching 40%. The countries with the least differences in pension amounts are Estonia, Slovakia, and Denmark. In Europe, it's estimated that on average, 22% of women age 65 are poor or at risk of being poor, compared to 16% for men. Even the retirement age is different. In Europe, the average is 63.5 years for women compared to 64.3 years for men. While some countries make no distinction between men and women, others let women retire sooner. In Poland or Austria, once women turn 60, they can retire, compared to 65 for men. Here in France, under the current rules, women who've worked less but who have had at least 2 children can still retire at 62, thanks to earned quarter credits.
Well, as we saw in that report then, France is not an exception when it comes to the gender pension gap. There's an average 26% difference in retirement income between men and women across OECD countries. So, Elena Basoli, how do you explain such widespread gaps seemingly everywhere?
Yeah, so it comes from the labor market for sure, because women are being a lot of discrimination in the labor market, and so this transfer and mirror in their pension later on, and of course, I mean there are gender norms, there are stereotypes, so there are also some type of jobs that are thought to be only for women. And usually this type of job have not of many progression during their careers. And of course, we do know there is the first child penalty. So after the first child, the women often come back to the job, but has a lot of difficulties having a progression in their careers. And so these are part of the reason why the wage gap translates perfectly into the pension gap.
Okay. In your view, do any European countries, or any countries at all, quite frankly, have sufficiently protective pension systems for women?
For what I can say, there have been like countries such as, for example, Finland, where from one side they increase their retirement age, but they also support workers to continue with the training and preparation to keep on working longer. And from the other side, they push firms to hire more older workers and subsidize hiring older people. And so this could be a way to have people sticking into the labor market without penalizing them too much.
Elena, as a final question for you then, what measures do you think that any gender equitable retirement system or reform proposal should include, be it in France or anywhere else?
Yeah, so for sure, every parental leave, maternity leave, every time that any women take off from work to take care of their family, it should be considered into the years of contribution for retirement, because it's unpaid work, but it's a very important work that women carry on through their lives. And so I think this should be valued. And also we should think about raising the minimum pension for all women that are very close to the poverty pension level so far.
Sounds like there's a lot of work to do then, perhaps, on this proposal then. Elena Basoli of the Paris School of Economics, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, over the past several years, Spain has been lauded for its exemplary reforms protecting women against gender-based violence. Passed by the left-wing coalition, the so-called Only Yes Means Yes law integrates consent to sex into the penal code. But a loophole actually allowed reduced sentences for some offenders, sparking the government to announce plans to modify the law. Our correspondents report.
Antonia is one of 300 collateral victims of the new Spanish Only Yes Means Yes law. Her husband abused her physically and sexually for 14 years. She was devastated to learn a court had cut his sentence by 2 years.
I feel abandoned, forgotten. It's really difficult. I mean, what is the point of judges?
Antonia has come to her lawyer to try to understand the reasons for what she considers an injustice.
Hola, Sandra.
Before, there were 2 crimes, of abuse and rape, and he was condemned for rape. The reform removes the distinction between these 2 crimes, widening the range of potential penalties for both, and he's received a reduction as a result.
Spain's penal code establishes that the most favourable law should be applied to a suspect, even retroactively. Originally sentenced to 13 years, Antonia's husband will be out of prison sooner than expected.
If they had wanted to do things well, with common sense, They should have put in place a transition regulation to avoid certain criminals benefiting from the law coming into effect.
The only yes means yes law was drawn up by the far-left party Podemos, which has blamed judges for cutting sentences.
Honestly, however painful that may be, I think you have to have a critical attitude about what is happening. But you also have to recognize that legal reforms sometimes produce undesired malfunctions.
Socialist Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has promised legislation to correct those malfunctions, but experts warn that won't reverse reductions already applied.
Well, who are the first composers that come to mind when you think of classical music? Probably Bach, Mozart, or Beethoven. That's because the classical music canon is undeniably dominated by white, Western European men. That is changing, though, and New York's Youth Symphony is adding to that. In January, it became the first youth orchestra to be nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Orchestral Performance. And in their debut album, they showcased the work of long-overlooked Black female composers, including Florence Price and Jessie Montgomery. Well, that's all we have for you this week. I'll leave you with some of their music. And in the meantime, you can, of course, connect with the 51% on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and also catch up on previous episodes on France 24's English website. Until next time, bye for now.